There you go.
Will do. Excellent. I'm Garrett Pryor, ODOT's toll policy manager. I'm a Wilsonville resident and love coming out to the county. Whenever we have choice for date night, instead of going up to Portland, we usually choose Newburgh or the surrounding area. So excellent to use the excuse to come down here. And thank you, Commissioner Kula, we did an area commission on transportation update there to the Mid-Willamette Valley Act and asked for kind of follow up here. Because we know this is a big change for Oregon. A lot of fear out there of what is the cost going to be, how's it going to affect my business, my quality of life. So I'm here not to try to convince you or gain you on team tolling, but just to provide more information and really highlight where are the areas, because there's plenty of decisions, especially coming up in the next 2 years here. Where can you influence and weigh in on that? Because it's not just the Portland Metro folks. We know this affects every neighborhood and corner of the state. So I'm glad to be here and would love to come back even if you need me at any future times. So, yeah. Thank you. So Paul's going to bring up, I want to show like a 2.5-minute video. I think it does a great job of just explaining like what's happening and from my coworker, Hannah, who has a much less nasally voice than myself. So I think you'll enjoy it here. So, Paul, do you want to play the video?
To improve traffic, the
Paul, I think we can't hear it. I don't know if you have to make sure you're sharing audio. You might get your voice over to. Yeah. Oh, that would be much subpar.
To improve traffic, the Oregon Department of Transportation is studying proposals for a variable rate toll, also called congestion pricing, on I-5 and I-205 in the Portland region. We've heard questions about what this means for I-205 and local roads. Analysis shows that tolling and investing in I-205 will significantly reduce congestion and improve reliability on I-205. Many drivers will see the tolled interstate provides a more reliable trip with reduced travel times and will choose to pay for that predictability. Less congestion can mean fewer hours spent on interstate travel, fewer emissions, and progress in meeting climate goals. With a toll, some drivers will choose to adjust their trip. For example, if you know the interstate will be backed up at 5 p.m., you may decide to delay your trip, change where you are going, take transit, or not make the trip at all. Avoiding rush hour travel improves the flow of traffic for people staying on the interstate. A variable rate toll prompts people to consider their best option. Some people are worried traffic will get worse on the side streets if drivers are looking to avoid a toll. We call this rerouting, which is a type of diversion. We already see this today as drivers are rerouting off the interstates to avoid congestion. If we do nothing, community impacts will continue to grow. The toll program wants to avoid causing neighborhood impacts. We're using computer models to predict what happens to traffic based on past observations, driver preferences, local roadway designs, development patterns, and time of day. At areas where drivers are predicted to use local roads and delay traffic enough to fail local standards of traffic flow, we will figure out how to fix the issue. For example, we could build a new turn lane, or change the timing of a traffic signal, or add bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We want to make sure you have the information about the tolling proposals under consideration. Please visit OregonTolling.org for the most up-to-date information.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. Next slide then. So that's a little bit of kind of snapshot into tolling. Tolling in the dark blue there is kind of the backbone of this larger ODOT. It used to be called mega projects. Now it's called the Urban Mobility Office. And it really stems from the that payroll tax that was passed back in 2017 to help fund all these billions of dollars basically of projects and investment in the Portland metro region. So this map is called the Urban Mobility Strategy, and it's a way of showing how ODOT's changing the way we do business. Instead of just chasing one project at a time, really looking at all these projects together, and not just the highway, the major bridges crossing the Columbia, Abernathy, and Boone Bridge, which are all planned for this. But how can we do that in a multimodal way that advances more options for more people? So not just a bus, but carpool, vanpool, all kinds of other modes. So that's this map that you see here. Next slide. We are, for me, for my role, it's not really an if tolling is happening, it's more of how that's going to be implemented. And we really, ODOT and the Oregon Transportation Mission got that direction a couple of times now from the Oregon legislature back in 2017 with that House Bill 2017. That's really the enabling language. And then just recently here in 2021 with House Bill 3055, that was a second commitment by the legislature to stay on the track for this tolling investing that you saw on the previous screen. Next slide. Just a reminder, this is kind of not your old, I lived a decade in Virginia and would scramble to find a coin to throw it in while this is all electronic tolling. Now it's even coordinated with the technology systems, really everything west of the Rocky Mountains. And so it's really meant to be that more modern operable system. Next slide. And then I did want to dive into one of the things as a toll policy manager, one of the three key policy areas I've been kind of instructed with is how are we going to address impacts to those experiencing low income? Those can be residents, travelers, but also we think about shift workers and others and small businesses who might not be able to change their time of day or who spend a lot of time on the highways getting around. So that's what I wanted to dive into here for a second, because that is a decision coming up to the Oregon Transportation Commission here pretty soon. So I would love to get your input on that today, but then I can also ask try to field any of the other tolling questions that you may have. Next slide. So we have an Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee that's really been working for the past few years to provide those different voices and perspectives that aren't normally involved in these transportation projects. And they've been a real leader in this report of not just providing their input, but connecting us to communities to really see how those impacts would occur to try to avoid and maybe even mitigate or advance equity. Next slide. So these are kind of the headlines of the reports on kind of where we're at now, that we would provide a sizable discount, whether that's a completely free trip or a deeply subsidized for people at 200% or lower of the federal poverty level. This is what we're seeing in, for example, like TriMet, the transit provider there in the region, has a reduced fare at that level. It also allows ODOT to use other service providers like SNAP, WIC, and others to provide the verification. So ODOT doesn't have to have a lot of that paperwork, and it makes it easier for people to enroll. And honestly, we could set up a system where if you're going there for existing services, like let's say here in the county, maybe you could sign up for a toll pass or connect right into this program. So we're really trying to strive to make that as easy as possible. For those, I mentioned those audiences. Here, can you go back one real quick, Paul? For that 200 to 400%, that is a smaller, more targeted discount we're leaning towards. We're not sure what that would look like yet, but that really is to try to capture and address at least some benefit to those who have to be on the road because of their business or job, and then would make above that 200% of the federal poverty level. And so the difficulty with that is there's not a lot of other programs to verify. So we're looking into the third bullet point there, some type of self-certification or enrollment, again, that would make it easiest on ODOT to administer, but then also people to sign up for. And there are some programs around the nation around almost like self-attestation or self-certification. So we're kind of further looking into that with the idea of what kind of auditing or monitoring can you build in if somebody is trying to abuse the system or that discount. Next slide. So I threw some percentages in federal poverty level. What does that actually mean? For Oregon there, we looked at, for a family of four, 200% of the federal poverty level is $55,500 for your entire household. So that just shows you how low the federal poverty level even is with that doubled. And then 111,000 for 400%. We are kind of further looking at, so if you provide these discounts, how many people does that incentivize or disincentivize driving? We have some of those analysis still to do, but we are finding that people of all incomes drive at all times, but during the peak hours, that like 4 to 6 p.m. or 7 to 9 a.m., we actually see pretty low concentration of low income drivers. It is predominantly middle and upper income drivers. And so therefore the economic impact to the amount of people we're seeing is a pretty small percentage as far as the mix, but we have more work to do on that. Next slide. When we look around at what have other tolling programs done in the nation for low income, it's pretty underwhelming, I would say, and enrollment is extremely small. So we want to do much better than that and really be kind of a industry leader we see here. Some other states, California and now Colorado, are starting to catch up and offering a little more robust program. But a key part of the report is not just what money would you provide, but how can people actually access it? And so here are some things around free transponders, providing a cash-based option. This would not just be for people who are low income, but we know a lot of people have concerns about what is ODOT going to do with my information, or privacy concerns, or setting up a bank account. So cash-based options can be available. Extensive marketing, promotion, engagement, trying to reach out to, again, all people in the state and get this in place before tolling begins. And then we do, if you might have heard of like horror stories from Northern Virginia where the toll rates spiked to like $60 a day, that type of thing, that's not the system we're approaching. So we do want to make sure signage and others that you know the toll rate before you get on the roadway, so you're not surprised by that. Next slide. So one more slide here. So these are the questions I'd love to queue up for today. But again, of those kind of walkthrough of that low income program, are there things you like about that? Are you things that you don't like or think should be changed? Or is there something I totally missed that I didn't cover? But with that, I think that's my presentation. I would love to hear what y'all have to say.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you very much.
So one of the things that really has always amazed me about this conversation is that we don't actually know what the proposed tolls are. And that's not true. ODOT knows exactly what they need to be in order to fund some of these projects. So what are you telling people when they say, what's our starting point?
Sure, definitely. So I wish I had a slide I'd show you. So these, we have two toll projects progressing. And we don't actually know the revenue numbers yet because we have to get into what's called the National Environmental Policy Act, or this deeper environmental review to really run traffic and revenue analysis numbers. We are about a month and a half away for the 205 toll project of releasing all that information. What are the expected toll rates? What's the net revenue? Basically what needs to cover operating, but then also pay for the bridge improvements. I am able to share for that 205 section, we are studying 50 to 60 cent tolls for those off-peak hours and overnight. And then for the peak hours, it would be $2 per bridge. So $4 total, right around there, $4 to $5. But that is, I agree with you, that's concerning, not able to have that information to more robustly share.
So $2 per trip. So if you're a commuter, it'd be $4 a day.
So it's actually, it would be tolled on two bridges, the Abernathy and Tualatin Bridge for just that 205 section. So it would be $4 if you went all the way through it. So $8 a day. If you're traveling at those peak hours, 7 to 9 a.m., 4 to 6 p.m.
So that's almost $250 a month if you're a commuter per driver. And this is, you didn't set up the system, so we're not coming down on you, but this is going to be a shock to Oregonians. We are not used to tolls. Washington, Washington has tolls up near Seattle across the bridge. But even California, when we travel down to California, a toll gets you an expressway. That's not going to get you an expressway here. You're going to pay a toll to sit in traffic. I think it's going to be a shock to the system. And I'm curious about, you say all of these new electronic mechanisms where you don't have to have, anything in your car, you don't have to buy a ticket or whatever. What percentage of the toll is actually going to go to pay for the infrastructure and the team of people, all of the employees that are going to have to manage this? I mean, is it 50%?
Spot on. That's what we have to, because you see nationally it ranges from 30 to 60%. So that's what we need to find out in these environmental review studies, because we basically, you start to learn more what are those infrastructure needs in that. So that's some of those, that month and a half, 2 months from now, it'll be called the traffic and revenue analysis, and we'll get an updated version of that to share to help kind of hone in on that question. About what the amount of money that's going to go to projects
versus
operations, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So some are 60%.
30 30 to 60 is what you said?
Yeah, just like a thumb in the air of where it's at generally. Mhm.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, and in terms of the low income effort, you know, you said 111,000 was sort of not the extreme group of people that we're looking at, but sort of the more of the mainstream service workers. You live in Wilsonville. I've lived in Wilsonville for many years. It did. You know, between your property taxes that you pay, which are astronomical. Some of my friends that live there pay upwards of $10,000 a year in property taxes. And you've seen what I-5 has done to Wilsonville communities in terms of Stafford Road and the traffic getting backed up and everything. $111,000 with a dual income family is not that much money to cover the housing costs. Those homes are going from $600,000 to $800,000 a piece. You know, we're not talking about low income folks. We're talking about folks who make that amount of money, which seems like a lot on paper, but in reality, it's not that much.
Mhm.
So this is going to be a huge shock to them. And especially if you consider that, you know, if you have teenagers and you have multiple drivers, that could be $1,000 a month if you have 4 drivers in your house and they all have to commute to work or school. I mean, it's just, I don't understand this
Hmm.
concept. I don't think that the public is prepared for this.
Sure.
Commissioners, you have questions?
I do. Commissioner Kula, do you want to go first?
No, I just had some, there was a request for thoughts on particular things, and I have those thoughts. So.
Okay.
And we've already had a part of this discussion at WAC too. So.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, I want to thank you for coming. I appreciate you coming, Garrett. I feel like we're putting you in front of the firing squad and we're shooting.
I said you will get a good, strong, hard question.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he still came.
Yeah.
Well, let me say that we mitigated that some because when Garrett arrived at the Board of Commissioners, he was met with the staff at the White House, and it was a robust welcome, wasn't it?
Oh, excellent White House welcome. First White House visit I've made. So.
Okay, so just, and that's how we kind of rope you in because
Yes.
now we're about to get tough here.
That's okay.
But thank you for coming.
Yeah.
A couple of things that you talked about. You talked about the whole tolling system. I grew up in Brooklyn and it cost me $7 each way to go to school in Staten Island. And I felt that. I was a waitress at the time. The other thing is when we talk about, we're not entirely sure about the toll rate. I've watched it go from 25 cents for me to get across the bridge to $7. We know tolls don't go down. And despite what they say, once they've paid for a project, they don't go away. I've never seen a toll go away. Everywhere I ever went, my whole adult life in New York, New Jersey, Staten Island, or any of those was a toll, a toll, a toll. You have the electronic system, which basically, not to be disparaging, but the state of Oregon is definitely a track record of not being very good with other people's data. So now you're giving them banking information, you're giving them all the privacy information, and we now have a database of who went where when. This is of concern. Yes, there's a cash option, but that is a little bit cumbersome. You talk about we're talking about the impacts on low income. Cascade Policy Institute did a study years ago on the impacts of, we talk about what light rail costs. If someone who is low income has a car to drive, talked about how many thousands of dollars more per year they made because they had the option of going to a job and not being dependent on mass transit. So there's that option. You say, we'll figure out how to address the issue of the rerouting and the side streets. Well, that is certainly not consolation. I mean, you mentioned the Stafford Road area. Having traveled that, it's getting more and more difficult. So we're talking about the impact on top of the fact that we're seeing, policies at the federal level that are causing gas prices to rise and food prices are rising and people are being choked. So when you say, well, we've got to make sure that we mitigate this for low income people, I know people who are not considered low income who are trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet. The other thing is ODOT, and it seems to be this sort of international war on the car, despite the fact that it gives us more mobility and more options economically, everything but building out capacity on highways and roads so that we have more capacity for people to have more options. We're trying to constrict that, take away these options. We talk about multimodal. The fact of the matter is people are not going to ride their bikes and they're not going to walk to work. They're going to get in their car and they're going to go. And if they have a 9-to-5 job, what are they going to do when they've got kids at home? Sit and wait for it to be an off-peak hour. So we really need to look at when you talk about a discount for subsidized trips, we're seeing this overall where we're trying to focus on this equity concept. The equity concept really does take from one group of people, give to another group of people to pay for things. We're seeing it in every facet of government and what taxpayers are providing it. We just heard about it with the student loans. It took me 10 years to pay mine off, so that's a sore spot for me today. So that being said, I think that we need to stop, and ODOT needs to stop with the class warfare. You make too much to get any kind of help, but it's going to kill you at the end of the month when you're paying $8 just to get through a little stretch. So this is the kind of stuff that I think we need to look at. And I think we need to fight back hard before it's a reality for people who are already struggling. If you could take that back to the folks in command and control, I know some people would appreciate it. And thank you for coming. We're still happy you're here.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Do you want to do any comments? Because I have some questions that were formulated from
Yeah, just real quick.
comments.
So,
Oh, yeah.
because there's some opportunities to weigh in on the rules around some of the things you just said. So, right now there's an Oregon Highway Plan toll amendment. And so it's setting up the policies for what's the monitoring, the future adjustments, do tolls go away or not? I agree. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of examples where they do go away, but we have, there used to be a toll on the Columbia River crossing. There used to be a bridge here in Oregon, and now that went away. So it's not I would say it's not the majority of what happens, but it's out there. And this policy amendment that's going forward now helps set the rules and guidance to ODOT for what should those future decisions factor in, and what should ODOT look at. So it's not a set it and forget it toll system, and that we're kind of looking at it and revising it based on those impacts. So that's happening now. And then just starting in a few months, we'll be looking at the rules around data privacy and oversight. And there are some existing rules now around limiting ODOT's ability and that to like capture some of that bank information and others that you would that are a concern, not just from yourself, but others that I've heard. So there will be some opportunities to dive into and influence that coming up soon.
Thank you.
So how do we offer input now?
So this is excellent. Paul's taking notes. I'm going to send these back. I'll also send a link to some of the things I'm mentioning around like the low income toll report or that Oregon Highway Plan amendment. And then signing up through our website, that OregonTolling.com, to get notifications whenever new decisions and things are coming to the forefront.
Okay. And yeah, I'm very familiar with that Cascade report. It was pretty fascinating. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read it. It talks about how the automobile has really sort of introduced this mechanism for pulling people out of generational poverty because they have access to things that they didn't have access to before. But ironically, Cascade is not anti-tolling.
Yeah.
They are fine with tolls so long as they're a user fee, meaning you have some specific benefit for what you're paying for, and you have a choice not to use it. If you don't have a choice, then then it's not necessarily like a user benefit type of mechanism. So
Yep.
Can you,
Commissioner Kula.
oh yeah, no, can you clarify, sorry, how would one not pay the fee? Are you suggesting it's like out of the goodness of my heart?
No. It's
Toll or-
it would be an
'cause I'm like-
expressway. Like I'm going to pay $10 so I can get from Wilsonville to Portland in
Mhm.
15 minutes. And I know I can get there in 15 minutes because it's an expressway versus
Is that the
taking
option that oh yeah, I
versus
see what you
taking the
mean.
normal freeway.
Yeah.
Where I don't have to pay a toll.
Right. In discussions and along those lines, in discussions that folks had after MWAC, and then kind of an ongoing like COG, we've had these conversations, is actually around that the user fee versus. So And traditionally, ODOT has been very proud of, we have a user fee that the user pays. Are you willing to dive into the philosophy of that or the reality of it? That is it a user fee? Because it does seem like slightly disconnected from user fee because it's paying bondholders.
I'm trying to follow where you're going there. I mean, because it is, you pay for the roadway that you use and those improvements that where you drive over, they're paid by the fees that you go into. Now, I think Commissioner bringing up a good point about like, where's the money spent on that? We have a very strong contingent that wants it to go to no highway capacity whatsoever and only to transit multimodal. And then we have folks who want to see just the wider bridges and the roadway capacity to provide that. I actually honestly feel like what we're hearing from our equity committee is somewhere in the middle, if not understanding and maybe pushing back a little bit on that the bus will solve all and that cars really are needed to reach those jobs. So that's the mix of what's still to be decided. So I would say it still is a user fee. You're paying for the experience. I think what that experience is still to be determined and kind of worked out.
Right, that makes sense. And surface streets that are clogged are essentially an option, right? So you in some ways, as you had mentioned, it was the person with the different voice about modeling, showing like what the experience is of paying the higher price and going at the higher price time, being the potentially the better experience for driving, right? I mean, that's the reality of it, is that if side streets are clogged, the road's going to be the place, right?
Yeah, because right now we're doing the modeling based off of you do nothing and you exist what the highway is today, and the backup on the Stafford roads and the others continue to get worse 30 years in the future versus the toll and invest. Because as far as ODOT, we have received no other direction from how else are you going to pay for the billions of dollars of investment that are there. And that tolling is not the sole solver of all that, but it's a key piece in growing the dollar to be able to do that.
Cool. And then I wanted to ask, following up, it's good to hear that there's conversation about anonymizing the data, right? There are great examples of how people do that, and there are great examples of not doing it well. So that seems like an important component if it's possible. In the Council of Governments, we've also had the conversation about tolling as a source of revenue versus a road usage charge or the gas tax. And it just seems like the conversation still needs to move forward about an alternative to the gas tax if revenue from gas tax continues to go down. So do you see the tolling program as being like a way to delay the necessity, or is ODOT still working on the road usage charge and what that might look like?
Sure, good question. So we definitely are working on, based on that 2017 legislative direction, to implement tolling as soon as possible to get those major infrastructure investments. At the same time, we also are pursuing the road usage charge. And I would say in the future, there will be some type of like adjustment and alignment between the two. I think for your road user charge, it really is looked at as that gas tax replacement or that conversation. But once that is in place, I think you'll then reevaluate the cumulative cost to the system of what people are paying. So we can look at road usage and tolling, but that's more so kind of a future conversation.
Right, because it makes sense. If you don't have enough money in gas tax in this existing world, household to 2017 and 3055 will we still need to do these projects?
Yeah,
it's the source of revenue. But if you're looking at a long-term sustainable, perhaps the tolling is something that can get phased out if we do it well, right?
Yeah,
it'll be all of us deciding how the road usage charge works. And the one thing I wanted to highlight is it seems like it would be valuable to I don't know how the transponder works, but we all, everybody who drives has a driver's license, gets correspondence from DMV. So hopefully there can be an auto, that we don't all have to opt in, because as you noted, in a lot of places, there's a program and families aren't participating in it because it's hard to reach people.
Yep. Yeah, and we're hoping the technology just catches up with that, whether you have in-vehicle technology with the industry is now kind of catching up to, and that's really the connection to usage charge, or like phone apps or
Right.
other kind of things that are a little more accessible. So
Okay, cool. And then I presume that with that, the informed decisions, then you'll make sure that people's driving apps also, like if somebody's mapping out a route, that it'll tell them.
Yeah.
That there'll be a charge if you go on this.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's factored into the modeling work.
Super.
So ODOT's going to know where we are at all times.
Well,
That's
I don't know if
comforting.
ODOT will. Somebody knows where you are at all times already, unless you turn your phone off.
So I'm curious, one of the criticisms of this is that this money will be paying for light rail expansion. So how much of this is actually going to go to bringing light rail across the Columbia River?
Sure. I'm not able to answer that specifically. I know that's in part of, so my world is more so the blue, the regional mobility price. So just the Oregon side of tolling, there's kind of this bi-state setup. I can bring you back some more information on kind of when that decision is made and how their calculations go. I know they similarly are in this one of those environmental reviews, so they will hit a time in that where that type of information is more so available for that discussion.
Oh, great, because that's around crossing the bridge.
Yeah.
I'm totally for crossing the bridge, right?
No, it's for building the infrastructure necessary to get the light rail to the bridge and across the bridge, which is one of the criticisms, is that most of this money is going to be funneled into that billion plus project. And we won't actually see any road improvements for the tolling that we're going to be paying. So
Oh, I thought that the crossing was told to pay for the crossing.
there will be
Forgive me if I'm
additional
not-
tolls on the bridge, is my understanding. There will be additional tolls to cross the bridge.
Right, but wouldn't those be paying, sorry, wouldn't those be paying, well, I should direct it, for the bridge itself?
Well, the bridge isn't just the bridge. It has connectors and things that have to be
Right,
brought up to it. So the light rail is continuous. So that's the criticism.
okay.
One of the other things that is frustrating is that I was around for the CRC debate back in 2011 and 12. Senator Lou Frederick, who is not politically necessarily aligned with where we're at, was very concerned about his neighborhoods in North and Northeast Portland, because a lot of the traffic diversion was going to go through his neighborhoods, and pollution, garbage, just all of the things that come with that. He was very outspoken about that. And yet in the video that we saw, it said, basically, we'll figure that out, right? That was the comment that the woman who was narrating made. We'll get to that. We'll figure that out. I don't think that that's going to be acceptable for people who live in Stafford and the surrounding areas in Wilsonville. So that's a concern, that there's really no answer to that. What are you going to do about people who are diverting off? Because it's not just about air quality or garbage or traffic or whatever. There's concerns about overall property values and this and that. So that would be a red flag for me.
Sure.
Something that you need to probably take
Yeah.
up the chain as well. So
And just to give a little more definition to that statement,
yeah.
will, meaning us and the city, we were just the other day having discussions with the Oregon City, Westland, Clackamas County on the of that analysis of what we're seeing happening on local roads and where ODOT would come in with money and investments to mitigate those impacts. So we'll figure out, meaning we'll figure this out before tolling begins. And then we'll commit to a system of monitoring and partnership to make sure we're not just, closed off on the highway into the future. But it'll be difficult to figure out.
That's a good point, though, that we'll figure out. The wheel is a lot of local government in addition to ODOT.
Mhm.
Yeah, because that was also for me. I was like, ooh, we'll figure out. It's not a great.
doesn't
It's not
instill
super
confidence.
comforting, but that's the real answer, right? Is
Yeah.
that you're gonna have to listen to the locals, look at the data, and take actions that keep people moving through the community, right?
Yeah, that's the intent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, a lot to take back, and we appreciate your patience and just hearing some very honest feedback, because this is what the community, frankly, is going to be feeling once these start to come to the forefront and the reality sets in. So appreciate you coming and answering questions.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thanks, Garrett.
Have
I
a good
think
one.
I have one last
Oh,
one. And
sorry.
sorry,
No.
don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't sweat everybody. But I recalled that at some point, Commissioner Berkshauer in a meeting, you were like, well, if tolling happens, and Garrett, today you said, well, tolling will happen. It's just how well it's how we implement it. And so I would love to get clarification from you so that I'm not just confused or making my own assumptions. But you said, but I apologize because sometimes I have trouble tracking like bills and amendments and the numbers. So the mechanism for having tolling happen is built into House Bill 2017 and then 3055. Is that how it works?
Yep, spot on.
Okay.
Go ahead and
So
take a look
it's
at that
state law.
legislation. Yeah,
Yeah.
state law, and it gives the Oregon Transportation Commission authority as the toll rate setting authority, and then it provides direction to ODOT to go and it lists out the projects that we're looking for the tolling strategy to go with, and they say that tolling has to be a revenue generator and manage congestion. It has to have those dual goals.
Right. So then Oregon Transportation Commission, regardless of who's on it, still has that charge. Right. They still have to do that, even if they say, well, we're going to set it at this, if it doesn't match what state law is requiring them to do. Yeah, they still need to set something that works to meet the laws and the project's costs.
Yeah, that's what we're working under.
That's super
that
helpful
assumption.
for me to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, I said if, because we have two gubernatorial candidates who said they will stop tolling and protect families. So
And I'm
that's
all,
an if.
yeah, exactly. That was a good clarification. But it's helpful for me to know what the mechanism would be by which the future governor might try to do that.
Yeah.
Mr. Pryor, Colton Totland, Assistant County Counsel. I also have some questions about mechanisms. Following up on Chair Berkshauer's question about how we can get involved now or weigh in now on the highway toll amendment. I'm wondering if that's a formal rulemaking process with an opportunity to submit comments, if we've missed the window for that, or if there's a upcoming deadline to weigh in that manner.
Sure, good question. So September 15th is, it's not a rulemaking, but it is a public comment that's available. And we'll be sure to get that link to you all.
Starts or ends?
Ends,
Oh,
sorry,
ends.
it's been open
Okay.
since like the last week of June.
Okay.
So that's there. And then an official rulemaking process will begin later this year, this policy amendment. And we'll actually be recruiting for seats on that. We're looking for people from around the state. So that's an opportunity. When I get that application, I can send it to you all to get people to apply and get voices from the community
Yeah, that would be
possibly on there.
Great question.
that would be great. When is do you have an idea for when the formal rulemaking will begin?
It's supposed to happen like December-ish timeline. We're hoping to get the policy amendment in place to then inform the rulemaking. So we're looking at the November OTC meeting as possible, like earliest adoption of that policy amendment that I just said was out for public comment.
Awesome. That's
Thanks,
super
Colton.
helpful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, really appreciate
Thank
coming down.
you.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thanks,
for
Paul.
coming.